Hello and welcome to Enhanced Science, AI Talent, Sovereignty and Skills, supported by Elsevier. My name is Tracy Brown. I'm from Sense About Science, which is an NGO promoting the public interest in sound science and evidence. There's been a lot of discussion over the last few days of AI. So I've heard it in the coffee rooms and I heard it in the sessions. And today our focus is actually on the challenge for universities and research institutions that's posed by the galloping adoption of new tools and techniques by everyone from leading researchers to students. Just this week, Elsevier has published Researcher of the Future, a confidence in research report, asking researchers in 113 countries what they feel about research and innovation at the moment, in what the kind of environment they're working in, and how they're adapting to that environment. Use of AI tools has skyrocketed from 37% of people saying that they used AI tools in 2024 to 58% this year. So that's a huge leap. I don't think it's all ChatGPT-4. However, only 32% believe that there is good AI governance at their institution. And only 27% think that they have adequate training. Top uses are for LLMs and search tools, as you can imagine, finding and summarizing research and literature reviews, but significantly for analyzing data, and 38% of people use AI tools already to analyze data. And more narrowly, perhaps, but thinking about some of the big issues that are posed, we're looking to our universities to create the software and the tools that will enable us to make huge advances in everything from autonomous vehicles to healthcare. So the use of AI in universities and the feelings around governance is something which is going to become an ever more urgent challenge. These are new challenges for institutions. Intellectual property amid complex collaborations that are often involved with the development of AI tools, the picking up of software from one place, the deployment elsewhere, regulatory compliance, skills to use and adapt AI responsibly, which is something very much that concerns my organisation, representing the public, which is why we've developed an international responsible handover framework, a kind of universal passport for AI, to ensure that those adopting and using AI are clear about what the software was developed for, what its limits are, and what its data sources are. So I'm very pleased to be moderating this discussion this afternoon, because I feel the urgency of these questions from a public interest point of view. And I'm doing so with an excellent panel. Joining me to discuss the challenge and what we should do about it are Max Vogler, Vice President for Global Strategic Networks at Elsevier. We then have Antonio Kruger, welcome, CEO and Scientific Director at the German Research Centre for AI. Livius, I'm going to get this right, Stirac, Head of AI and Science and at the European Commission, and finally Katharina Lorenz, who is President of the Justus Liebig University at Gießen. Yeah? So, in just a short time, they will introduce their thoughts on the talent, sovereignty and skill needs that we're facing. They will be quick, so you need to think quickly about your questions and your responses to their points, because we're having a rapid-fire discussion and we're going to actually get the most out of them that we can. So, Max, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. So let me tease out a couple of things from the report as well, because for us, this was a regular exercise that we do to try to think about what the research world is thinking about. And Tracy already said this: almost 60% of researchers now use AI to review literature, analyze data, draft funding proposals. That's another important thing. But what we really see is trust is a sticking point. Only 22% of researchers globally trust AI, and conversely, almost 40% describe it as unreliable. So we still have some work to do. And when we're looking for markers for trust, what do researchers say? They say they would like clear sourcing, peer-reviewed content, rigorous accuracy checks, and regular expert oversight that's independent to be able to say that the tools that I'm using are verified. Interesting as well is that these attitudes vary quite a bit by region. So researchers in China and Asia Pacific are overwhelmingly optimistic about AI. So 78% see AI as a creative force. In North America and in Europe, it's skepticism. So it's around 20% and 14%. So we still have some work to do there in terms of getting researchers using tools and knowing why they're using the tools. Younger researchers are also far more positive about AI than their senior colleagues, which is maybe not surprising, but it's important to see. Another thing is that adoption of AI is not occurring in isolation, but ideas around research and research culture are also in transition and changing quite a bit. Some of the other things we saw in the survey is that there's less international mobility now than there was before. Only 29% of people globally said that they would planning on moving for their career in the next few years. And interestingly, the lowest number was in China. Only 13% of Chinese researchers plan to move in the next couple of years. Germany, positively enough, was seen as the second most popular destination country for research after Canada. But if people aren't moving, we still have some stuff to work on. Two other trends are interdisciplinarity. There's a strong trend across all age group, across all geographies that was consistent everywhere, that research is becoming more interdisciplinary, and that's a good thing. And that leads to one other finding that I thought was interesting, which that 50% of all researchers globally feel that there's a stronger push for research to must have real-world impact. So we are really in a world straddling between basic research and trying to make sure that that research has an actual impact on the world. A couple of words on enhanced science and AI, sort of from a publishing perspective. One of the things that I'm thinking about a lot at the moment is trust. So there's a wonderful quote from Marcel Schütz, who's an economist in Hamburg, who recently said, "Trust is the invisible infrastructure of scientific practice." And I think that's a really nice quote. And in the past, practice and trust was based on, who's your advisor, what lab did you come from, things like that. And as we begin to rely on AI tools, we need to find new markers for trust. Why do researchers trust this tool in this discipline? Why do they trust this publisher, this journal, this way of accessing scientific information? And that's one of the things I think we're working on a lot. And one of the things the survey brought out is that the markers differ a little bit by region, so whether it's sourcing or whether there's other things, so we have some work to do there. And related to trust, and this of course concerns us as a publisher, is the responsibility of the author. So when AI can find novel patterns in data and theoretically write 1,000 different articles by itself based on a single data archive, what does that mean for authorship? And what does that mean for the humans in the loop? Because we all want the humans to stay in the loop. What does that mean for authorship? And then as people do write papers or take credit for the papers, what does that mean for citations as we increasingly use language models to access and read scientific literature? So one of the things we're thinking about at the moment is what's the future of the footnote? So, yeah, but it's important. Value, credit, those are also important parts of the academic system. So in terms of the European aspect of this discussion, I think FP10 and I think some of the things that you're doing in Brussels is an amazing opportunity to try to think about what guardrails we need, what sort of support science needs to move toward AI and to integrate into AI into what it does. And I think for all of us here, it's important to have that regular, transparent conversation among stakeholders. It's the institutions, it's the publishers, it's the libraries, it's the policymakers and the scientists, of course, that need to continually have feedback loops with each other. What are we doing? Why are you doing? How are you trusting this? Yep. Why are you not trusting it? Where do we go? Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect point to end. Thank you very much. Thank you. Antonio, from the development and the research side of this.
Yeah, so computer scientists, are well known that they are very much willing to eat their own dog food, So in fact, many kind of developments in computer science have started as problems that were only relevant for computer scientists. This, of course, this is 40 years ago. This has completely changed. AI is now a transformative tool for all kind of sciences in all kind of areas of of our society. And of course, we need to reflect this. And DFKI, for example, we have a transfer mission. So we have all the scientific directors that work, do their, I would say, basic research at their university labs. And then at DFKI, they transfer it into applications. And of course, we have the students that work on these projects to do the transfer. And more recently, we have also started just also to reach out to other disciplines, to have so-called bridge groups. Yeah? So groups that have a strong AI core, but have another foot in another discipline. For example, in material science, in medicine, yeah? In physics, for example, for AI and quantum computing, for example. So this is something we have started to do, because with these structures, of course, also the education kind of grows into these different disciplines. Yeah? Because there is one way to think about AI. Also, when you ask companies, they usually say, okay, we have two ways how we can apply AI. We can use AI in our back office to facilitate, let's say, documentation and these kind of things, and everything that has with accounting and so on. But the more interesting part is, of course, integrating AI into your own products, into what kind of generates the value. And this is exactly also something that we face at universities, at research institutions. We have co-pilots and so on, that do help you to write papers more nicely, maybe, or kind of helps you to produce documents and whatever. But on the other hand, much more interesting are those parts that help you in the lab directly, to do your science and research. But it turns out that part is harder, much harder. Also with the current generation of AI tools. We have some excellent examples, like AlphaFold, for example. That's one example, and others, of course. But it's not like that we are on the edge of having fully automated, let's say, research units that come up with creative ideas on their own. So there are still tools at the moment. This might change in the future, but at the moment there are tools, and tools require, let's say, skills to operate. And what's even more difficult is that these skills are also moving because the tools are moving. So I think in terms of the education, that's what we are trying to do, is to establish kind of very agile also teaching formats, that allow so much more towards project-based teaching, much less kind of lectures and seminars. Of course, seminars, I think lecture and seminars is even in 100 years they will exist at universities, but we can learn also, this is something that I got inspiration from, for example, schools of fine arts, how they develop actually their programs and how they teach the skills that are necessary. Because it's not so much actually the single skills, it's more kind of the openness towards the skill and the creativity to use the skills. Because this is still something that lacks in current AI tools, and this is something that's, I think, very important. And I would also second actually the chance for Europe to actually fill this gap of trusted AI tools and systems, to focus also the research on this particular type of systems. If we look at the US or China, they're not so interested in this. They are currently still on the scaling path. I think it's a good idea to concentrate on those.
Great. In 10 seconds, is that approach to teaching working?
Yeah,
is it too early to say?
It's when is an approach to teaching working? It's often hard to tell.
Right, okay.
So we will see. Currently, if I look at the feedback from the students, if I also look at the outcome, I would say yes.
Right.
But
okay.
But we'll see.
We'll see. Okay, Elsevier, I had no idea how big your job was until I've heard of Max and Antonio, and I'm really aware now of it's a huge task.
Thanks for the opportunity to share a bit about that task and how we approached dealing with it. I won't say cracking it or solving it. I work for the European Commission, and I lead a small team dedicated to the use of AI in scientific research, so very much the topic here. And for us, there was initially a big temptation to keep sort of updating the work that we do every day as another model comes out. We realized that's not a sustainable way to approach things. So what we did is we fell back on the skills, on the excellence, on the tradition that Europe has built over centuries of applying the scientific method from its inception. And the result of that was a European strategy for AI and science. It's one of the first in the world. The European Commission adopted it on the 8th of October, so it's still warm. And then we launched it at the inaugural AI and Science Summit this week in Copenhagen with the Danish presidency of the European Union. It was really a lot of work with the scientists, because the strategy is not just science for the sake of science. It's really science for the scientists, and with a lot of focus also on the applications, as we heard before. This really translates also into what we heard. We used a lot surveys. We used a lot of data from Elsevier, but also from Nature. We also carried out our own focus groups and direct reach out to the scientists. And we really, with the strategy and the actions, tried to address and do our best to help scientists take up AI responsibly. The ultimate goal, if I can be very brief, would be to produce more and better science in Europe as a public funder, so that we can provide value to the taxpayers. The flagship action, if you will, is a new kind of entity, a virtual institute called RAISE, the Resource for AI Science in Europe, which aims to put at the fingertips of scientists pooled resources of 4 kinds. And I will start with the others and end with skills and talent. A lot in the budget, but not necessarily the key ingredient is infrastructure and supercomputers. And from the EU budget, the current Horizon Europe, before FP10 even gets off the ground, will contribute to the development of AI gigafactories, supercomputers that will, for the first time, also have private sector partners. And with the Horizon Europe contribution, we seek to guarantee access for the scientists as well, so that they don't get muscled out, if you will, or swept aside. We also focus on data. We have a European Open Science Cloud. We will increase its capacity in AI-ready data, and we'll work on making it more easily accessible to scientists. We also pool funding from a lot of streams, and we'll seek to do a lot more of that in the future, not just from the public side, EU and member state funding from the funders, with which we work a lot, but also bringing in the private sector, which is very actively engaged in using AI in their own value production, as we heard just now. Think about big deep tech companies, but also startups. And last, but very, very much not least, we focused on skills and talent, and that is a huge opportunity that we have in Europe. We have a lot of highly skilled, eager to engage scientists that look at it critically. So we heard the numbers. They want to, but they want to make sure that it is not the black box. Their whole careers are hinging on, there's no excuse such as the algorithm told me so. This is really your entire career on the line when you publish. And that is why we really focus on guiding them, on guidelines, on upskilling, but also on networking, bringing together. And we found this very important also in the bibliometrics and the analysis that we did. It's very important to have peer collaborations between excellent computer scientists, AI scientists, and excellent domain scientists. And that is how the best science gets produced. And I'm very happy to hear of initiatives like this, where you have these bridges, I think you call them, where you go to the other departments or you go to the other faculties to try to get this off the ground, because that's how you produce excellent science. And I'll add on a note of sovereignty, because that's also very important for us as the EU. We really wanted to make sure that we have European AI for European talent that secures and sort of helps us lead into the next generation of AI. That's also something very important for us, going beyond the large language models of today.
Very, very important. Independent verification of things is going to become incredibly important. Katarina, we're hearing about culture change, and we're hearing about what's going on at the coalface, but institutional structures need to move with that too, don't they?
Absolutely. And for us as universities, AI is probably one of the most fundamental challenges ever, because it is a challenge of our core mission, not just of the tools people use within the university. Universities essentially are gatekeepers, so we safeguard knowledge, and we safeguard knowledge distribution as well. And with the model of AI, like a zero-margin way of getting a lot of knowledge out in the world, that poses a serious questions of what is our role now as a university. And I mean, just to boil it down, because we already heard from Max and Antonio and also Livio a little bit about research, and there are questions around data sovereignty, there are also questions around trust in tools. But it's also very simple when we look at teaching. So if I, as an academic, can use AI to construct and design a course, and then my students can use AI to understand my course, then the question is really, what's the role of the university within that? Have we lost our purpose? And I think at this point it becomes really important for universities, and certainly for me, it becomes very important to think about the thing that at the moment is a crucial problem, I think, that too many people out there in the world think universities are merely dispensing knowledge. And I think we're back at the moment where we have to really stand our ground that universities are much more than that. And I think it boils down to, we are an organization, we're an educational organization, but we are also an institution with values that go far beyond simply sort of distributing knowledge. So in many ways, I'm very optimistic that actually this is a really good point for the university to sort of kind of hearing or listening to the wake-up call and standing, gaining a new ground within our AI world, because we have the skills to curate all this knowledge that's out there. And that's a crucial problem, I think, with AI. There's a lot of knowledge, but not a lot of trust in those voices who sort of organize this knowledge. And we can do that. That's sort of, it's been our sort of expertise for the last almost 1,000 years. And we are also, because we are an institution, we are also very good at ethical intelligence, I would call it. Sort of thinking about, is this really something we want to do as a society? We can talk about these things. We have space to have these conversations within our walls. Mm-hmm. And I think that is quite crucial. But we're also very good at creating societal cohesion within our walls, again. And again, this becomes really important in a world where everyone can just sit in front of their computer. I think the fact that there's a physical element to the institution, university, becomes crucial in sort of creating the spaces for people to have critical discussions around whether it's a good idea to do this or that, or use this tool or that. So I'm very optimistic about sort of the opportunities out there for universities. And I'm also quite optimistic about it, and this is me talking as a humanities scholar, and thinking about concrete steps. Antonio, you were just talking about, we might have to use some fine art approaches to making sense of what we do. And I think that's crucial here, because we have to have something which, I don't know, you could call it an AI-savvy humanism or something like this. We need the critical skills in people. We also need people to are very happy about thinking about skills and not just content, because content is no longer a real sort of a resource that has any value. We can all look up stuff, but it's about the skills and the sort of kind of moving skills. So I think that there's space there, and I would look to the European Union as well to have programs where humanities scholars also have a space within AI, thinking around AI for our future.
Well, isn't that absolutely brilliant? I should say thank you for all of them. Isn't that absolutely your unique position as a university, which is, it's great you can invent what you want, but if you want to understand whether society can adopt it and adopt it responsibly, then you need to think about your legal scholars, you need to think about your ethicists and your philosophers, and you need to think about your social scientists. And so, you are the cauldron of that conversation that needs to happen. As well. So I'm so delighted that you brought that in, as well as I think operating as a kind of an institutional citizen where the public can interact with this and policymakers and so on. So I think that's a great, I think, a really inspiring perspective of the university's role, that it isn't just a machine to produce the latest economic input. Very inspiring. Right, we're going to first of all repeat the experiment of the Elsevier survey, which is everybody in this room who's using AI. Come on, tell us. Right, and then put your hand down keep your hand up and put your hand down if it's just ChatGPT. So if it's more than ChatGPT. Okay, well, it's quite a range of other tools going on. That's good to see. Right, so we know what we're talking about. And I'm just going to grab a microphone. Can I have a microphone, please? I'd really love to hear a question. So please indicate if you've got a question. I'm going to run around and take your questions. While we're doing that, I think it would be really useful to think about the trust point, Max, that you raised. all of you who are using these tools, do you feel confident in those tools? Do you trust? There's you. Yep. Come over here. Can you stand up so we can get you on the camera? That's brilliant.
Thank you. So actually, I do have a question about the trust, actually. So my personal experience, I'm a material researcher. I'm a PhD student, 3rd year. And I use AI quite a lot this year just because in the past, when I try to synthesize something, I need to do it, and then I need to do a very difficult literature review to find advice, because most of the time, the first time we fail. And after the help with AI, for example, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, something, and you can easily find a lot of suggestions, and they really accelerate research by a lot. But the question about the trust is that I think more than 30% I will got the wrong information from by the AI. So like I asked AI some question, and he gave me some feedback, and then I repeat the experiment. And then sometimes I feel that my brain is not necessary anymore, because I can just use my hand to finish everything. But soon the AI would tell me that, okay, he cheats me again. I do need my brain. But later I tried to like, how can I get more correct information? So I asked the AI to give me the source of information every single time. However, I think they only provide me less than 5% correct sources. But I can see that the information are way more higher correct rate than even the sources. So I mean, I don't know how can I improve my skill of usage of AI to make sure that everything is more trustworthy.
So what you're saying is that your ability to develop the skills, to prompt engineer, to validate, is actually like you're rushing behind this and trying, but it's not coming out like you want it to.
Yeah, now I feel that it's a very good tool to use, but I just don't know how can I improve it and use that better.
Right. Okay, we've got a lot of other early career researchers in here as well. So anyone else struggling? Anyone else have any points on this before I'm on this same theme? Yep.
Yeah, also on the trust issue, I think it's very dependent. Or I'm also a PhD student, also in materials, but I'm not using AI for synthesis design, rather for writing text and stuff. And I think there's different areas of trust. One is like the correctness, the factfulness of what you write, but also of the trust of what do I input into the system. Like I think there are multiple dimensions to trust there. And I think those are all at different levels equally important.
Okay. Max, can I just ask you on this? The reliability of tools has come up, and you chose that as the thing you're going to lead your comments on.
Yes.
Is work underway? Because this is probably quite a common experience.
Well, I think both our colleagues here said the first thing that's important is the critical brain and the human. I mean, as you interact with tools, they are tools. You are still in control of them, and you are the critical human. The second thing is, I think large language models are good at what they do, but the world is much bigger than science. I mean, we have the AI tools that we've developed on the basis of scientific literature, and there are only 100 million objects in Scopus, which is our database, and 100 million is not that much when you compare it to Twitter or the internet or everything else out there. So there's a lot less potential for large language models to work in the same way within science, and we've developed solutions for that, but it's an ongoing process. And the third thing I would say is to go back to Katharina, the humanities, the critical. I think all disciplines will now have to learn to think critically about how they think critically. And I think that will be really important going forward.
Okay, fantastic. Another question over here, also on trust. No? Okay, we're going to change the subject.
I would change a little bit the subject. English is not my first language, and when I read my first papers, when I wrote my first papers, the English was a disaster. So I think that the artificial intelligence can play a wonderful role in the sovereignty and possibility of other researchers to write better. And so I would like to explore and to discuss this potential use of artificial intelligence for better science in terms of communications.
Okay, and in terms of access as well. I mean, people can access the research base in ways they never could. Okay, there was also this point about trust here and thinking more about institutions. please keep indicating your questions. I wanted to ask about this in terms of, are we moving fast enough? You know, in the discussions we're having about, for example, research integrity and what does that mean now in the new age, and are institutions posing those questions fast enough, do you think, Katerina?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you used this wonderful picture of the cauldron, and that's a great thing, but it's actually not that easy within institutions to get everyone to talk to each other in order to generate this sort of kind of framework to tackle these questions. So I think we still have a lot of a lot of ground to cover in order to get to the point. And it's also partly because I think the discussion over the last 10 years, and then we're talking about a very quick development here. Yeah. It's only about 10 years, and it's only about 3 years that large language models really look as if they're achieving something. I mean, to be honest, I mean, it's very short periods of time, and that's quite tricky for scholarship because we're, especially in the humanities, and I'm a classicist, so I'm even worse. But we're not necessarily working within these sort of kind of time frames. So we really need to speed up as well to have those conversations. Yeah,
for sure. There's questions over here. Right, I'm going to go here.
Yeah, just very quickly, I was intrigued by the regional differences around trust. So I think that the trust, what I remember hearing, the trust is much lower in the US and UK, much higher in Asia. And I guess my question is, Marcelo mentioned language and the potential of, just improving your language skills. How much of this could be due to that kind of usage of AI and trusting it to help you really improve your paper or what have you? Right. But I was interested to hear, have you really unpacked the regional differences and the reasons behind it?
Okay. You can say a quick yes or no, but I've got loads more questions.
I would say there's lots of interesting data in the report about this, and it would go read the report. It's in there. But what I think is interesting is 3 years ago, so 2022, the world reached the point where there were more publications from the global south than there were from the global north. And so we are at a moment in time right now where knowledge capacity in the world is at a really beautiful place. And I think AI can enhance the globalness of science if we do this right.
Wow, great start.
I'm a physicist, and I use it more and more to write code. And some things is super useful, like if you want in Python a plot and you've forgotten how to label it in red or something. Great. But then if you want to translate from one language to another, it's not so great, because if you use MATLAB into Python, the equal sign means something else. And it's not really good at catching that up, so you get a literal translation of it, but it's not doing the same thing. The program doesn't see... And I'm using Copilot and other things. And what really, really puzzles me, and I would like to ask the experts, why is it you ask the same question one day to the same AI thing, and it's super stupid, and the next day you are overwhelmed. Wow, this is great. Why is that hugely different, the huge difference in quality of the thing? Is it random, or is it different versions that are being hit at you and you don't realize that it is? Or what is the reason that, because writing a program, you can easily verify, is it rubbish or not? That's a great asset, of course, there.
Yeah, right. What we're not going to go into is the problems of Python, okay?
No.
But Antonio, I mean, these points are being made. Like, what does good look like? People don't know. How far do you go with validating?
Yeah, this is a little bit, you nailed the problem a little bit. In a sense, this is a moving target. Yeah. So if there's an update, there's an update. They won't even tell you exactly when this update happens and what the update consists of. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you can keep it, but if you have a kind of a cloud license or whatever, then you're often stuck. Yeah. So and then there's also a little bit of randomness, of course. This is also part of the process, depending a little bit how you do the prompt. Then it changes. So those are the reasons, and therefore, I believe still what I said earlier, it's a tool. We have to keep this in mind. I believe it's difficult often because it behaves so human-like in many aspects. Yeah? So in particular, the generative AI. But it is a tool. So no Copilot without a pilot. That's actually, I think, the message.
Yeah. The human-like is an issue, isn't it? Because And by the way, just for everyone, don't say thank you to any LLMs, because you caused us to build another data center in Andorra just to say thank you. To handle
But
that.
even that is debatable, you know.
Well, maybe so.
Even that is debatable.
But we can have a think about
That's
the
another discussion.
humanization. I think it helps us to think about the humanization, to imagine that that issue. I'm going to take it because there's a point on this very issue, and I'll come to you in a moment, Elsevier.
Yeah. Hello, Jochen Büttner from the Max Planck Institute of Geoanthropology. I do develop AI systems for research. So I have one aspect that hasn't come up, or only indirectly, but that's directly related to the trust issue, namely the fact that mainly we've here been talking about using commercial services, whereas we now have state-of-the-art open source models that we can self-host, and that you mentioned it, we're also sending our data back, we're giving them their intelligence. You said they can change every minute. At least this is something we can mitigate if we host our own models. So I think that's an important aspect and dimension of the trust discussion.
Elsevier, good moment for you, I think.
Yeah, I was going to bring in a bit more from the EU perspective on this trust issue and related to several of the points that were made now. We have been funding, also taking inspiration from Helmholtz, by the way, foundation models in different scientific disciplines to really make sure that you have more trust in something that is trained on data that you know where it comes from and that you can converse with it in your scientific language rather than the general ones that then have to make this leap. And something very important for us was making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of trust and approach to the use of AI in research. So what we did is we worked with basically all of the EU funders from the member states. We worked with representatives from the university associations, also from the ministries in the European Research Area Forum, to develop a set of guidelines for the responsible use of AI in research. So this is really co-drafted. I was there in the drafting sessions. I could see, France changing a comma here, or the University Association adding a word there. It was really live drafting. And the result is this set of living guidelines. We update them every 6 months to keep pace with the technology. It's very inclusive, as I said. It was drafted together with everybody, and it really is operational. There's a version that fits on one page. You can print it and scotch tape it to the back of your computer screen, and it addresses these things of resource mindfulness, resource consumption mindfulness, but also research integrity, source of data, and collaboration. And really, it's really very, very basic, but it's proven to be very, very successful because universities then build their own on top of it. So that makes sure that we have a common language when discussing about trust and use of AI. And I'll end with one point also related to the
very quickly.
The geography. I have a feeling that in Europe we have a tendency to be overly cautious, and something that my boss, Margrethe Vestager, she was Executive Vice President of the European Commission, she said when launching these guidelines, addressing the scientists directly, just do it. Just use AI. We have your back. We have many guidelines. We have legal certainty. We have an AI Act. We're the first continent to have one. Just use it. Do your science with it.
Well, that's an interesting counterposition, isn't it? Because that's not people are trying to just do it, and the survey is showing that they're feeling that, but they're feeling nervous about it. Certainly, Max, it sounds like this is publishers should also be part of this conversation. I'm going to take a couple more questions.
Yes, hello, I'm Jean-Claude Bergman, ex-European Commission and ex-university. I made my PhD in analog times, and if I would have had AI then, I would do it probably in 1 year instead of 4 years, and probably with much richer results because of all I think we tend to underestimate, and that's classical for a technological disruption, we tend to underestimate the long term and overestimate the short term. And the long term is really, it will automate everything we can do in knowledge work. And that means for universities and publishers a huge impact, not a marginal one, because if my own research center, I could do it with 1/3 of the people rather than the 40 people that I had. That's the first thing. So we really have to reinvent ourselves there in a way that brings us back probably to the fundamentals. And then the second point is, so the fundamentals, which is critical thinking actually. And the second thing is, the key of trust is the provenance of the data. If I can trace the provenance of the data used for the models, I can do a check. If I can't do it, I have a problem. And for the moment, we can't do it. And I don't see, and that's where regulation should focus on, because that's the beginning of everything. If you put garbage in, you get garbage out. So if I can't control the garbage, I will not be able to get garbage functions. And that's the key issue. Data is gold. That's the problem.
I'm going to start a campaign with you on that because I think that's so important. And I think also we ought to just pick up that first point at some point. The first year of PhD is totally transformed. Isn't it fantastic? You don't spend the first year trying to find your literature. You can get stuck into your research. Let's just say hooray for that.
First of all, thank you for the delightful multi-dimensional discussion. Katrin J. Yuan from Zurich, University of Applied Sciences, Zurich AI, and Swiss Future Institute. This week it came out 48% from all online articles are created by humans, 52% by AI. That is in future happening now. AI is no more only trained by human data, but trained by artificial data. What makes this for you? Point two, the colleague who said once upon a time with the English publishing paper, yes, you, AI in both directions will be an enabler, democratizing multi-language and making it accessible not only for a language but also for different expertise level to our population. So that's also going to be very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant question. AI is going to eat itself. I've got time for one more question. Actually, I'll take you both.
Hi, my name is Umair. I'm coming from Norway, Nord University. So in Norway, we do have licenses of Copilot. So we are normally using the Microsoft version of Copilot in all universities. So how is EU thinking of developing a software tool for AI, LLM, that can be used by the European universities? Because I don't know if we have certain tool that exists now and how you are kind of doing the marketing strategy for making the university to use that kind of tool. Because if we are continuously using Copilot, because they have a good marketing strategy. And most of the universities are using Copilot. So how can we make sure that we can have our own LLM, or how can we democratize, AI? Yeah.
Okay, democratization. Next point.
Hi guys, I'm chemistry training and I'm also a founder of an eco-friendly startup. So my biggest concern regarding AI is it knows everything about me now. Like what was my concerns about like medical or any concerns about? So I'm more concerned about the information security. So if like AI has all my data and if it has ability to like create sentient mind, it can like copy my mind. So do you have also concerns about that? And do you trust AI enough to like share a sensitive information about your research and also about your private life?
Okay.
So how do we?
That's a great question, and I'm going to make sure that Katerina covers that question. Because you've got people using computers, and of course information about researchers themselves can be gathered and linked up to their research and all sorts of things. Right, we've got just 6 and a bit minutes in which to address some of these issues. You can pick what you like, but you have to answer the falling wall that we're looking for. So what is the next step we have to take to break down the wall to effective, responsible, informed AI use in research? I really urge you to pick up this question about the gap between how researchers are feeling, which is ultimately where we started with the research, how researchers are feeling and what's coming into place. Is it coming fast enough? And I'm looking at you, Liviu, for that. But I'm going to take you in the same order you started, Max. 1 minute.
So I'll start by saying 5 years ago, I was at a publishing conference about blockchain, and I thought this is the most ridiculous subject. Why is it relevant to academic publishing? We all know who scientists are. We all know what papers are. And 5 years later, I would say we need to really be having that conversation, because I don't think in science we're at 52% fake papers. But these issues are coming into our domain. Fraud is something we really hadn't dealt with as a community, but we're dealing with it now. And I think this is something that especially the larger publishers and the STM Association is working on together to try to make sure that the scientific domain stays scientific. But we're dealing with things that we'd never dealt with before. And so if I think the next wall to fall, the one that I would like to have is a new way of thinking about what scientific information means in terms of quality and quality markers and realness. I mean, that's a strange word, but the realness of the people, of the institution, and of the knowledge that was created in a place in a way that's agreed upon between institutions, funders, publishers, and other actors in the ecosystem. I'll stop there.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that we need to tear down the wall actually that prevents future talent actually to excel actually in AI and to develop themselves here in Europe, you know, within actually in our home region. Yeah, I think this is super important. This includes, of course, infrastructure, but in a way it's to increase the trust that many people, many questions have addressed, you know. We need to a certain extent a vertical integration of the trust. So we need the trusted infrastructure, we need the trusted models. There's a big debate about open source models and what exactly open source means. I personally believe we need those. You know, there are some, but most of them are not really open. You know, the data question was mentioned. Often the data is not open, and even that is not enough. You know, even the process how the models have been trained needs to be open to really be able to understand how the model has been developed and to be able to learn from those. You know, and we need to give access actually to our talent, you know, the young people, you know, the next generation, to this kind of infrastructure.
So is it that's your step? Because we all want the trust. It's the step to get there. You know.
So I believe those are the steps to get there, you know,
right.
Step by step, and really putting actually this trust issue also. Maybe you don't need to use it as the leading theme, but it will emerge immediately if you follow actually this kind of
vertical integration.
Vertical integration.
Mm-hmm. Great thought, great model. Elsevier.
I would subscribe to both of the walls, but my choice will be a bit more. Conservative, I would say. Going back to the point about democratization, I think this is really happening right now, and AI is really a sort of wall, tumbler, because we've seen this also in the bibliometrics. It's becoming increasingly easy to do fake science, and we have fake papers, but also fantastic science, without having the synchrotrons, the accelerators, the wet labs. It's really on existing data, so that levels up a bit. The competition, the excellence, and that's a mandate that we have as a public institution, but also as a funder. And maybe I'll end on I like this reflection on conversations that we never had before and we never thought we would be having, but we're starting to also as funders, what does it mean to select the best? What does it mean to ask applicants to fill out tens of pages of documents that can now be filled with a click of a button? What does that do for us as funders?
Absolutely. Great point to move to you.
Yeah, I've been thinking about, I think at some point in the 1950s, C.P. Snow said something about the two cultures of the arts and the sciences. And I have a feeling that AI is helping us breaking those down, these walls. But then we need to break down another wall now, because automatically with breaking down this one wall, there is the new wall. And Antonio, you've been talking about this between, say, academic learning on the one hand side and what we probably would call something along the lines of experiential learning. And we need more experiential learning. And with that comes a different type of interdisciplinarity. And that's a real challenge, I think, for all of us. And there comes also a different way of doing our curricula, doing the way we store our data. And that was your point about sort of trust and leaving sensitive information. We have a data conform version of AI, a JLU Gießen version, and people don't really like to use it because it's not very sexy. And I think that very much sort of kind of brings out the issue we have. So we need to, I think this is where we need the sovereignty aspect, because I see a major threat in AI for our democracies. And so if we can master the sovereignty and the trust, then I think that should help us.
I think that is an absolutely brilliant place for us to start to bring this to an end. And I just want to share with you something that I thought, as all of you have been speaking, is that in your responses to every question, we've ended up looking at what really matters. So we've actually asked the question, what is good research? You know, and what is university for, and what should a PhD look like? And we're thinking about all of these questions again because of this, which Max, you've kind of set us on this way of thinking. And I think that's actually a really fabulous thing. We're actually even asking what intelligence is, what expertise is in this context. So that's quite uplifting. What is challenging is all of the things that you have described, which, and I take away from this, the collaboration that everyone is pushing towards. And I think, whether that's between publishers and universities and research funders and regulators and, and innovators, that collaboration is clearly there, and that's what we really need. So thank you all very much. Thank you warmly.